Hi, and welcome back to the final chapters of Bread from Heaven. He's been receiving bread. We don't know where it's coming from yet, but he's been saving it to show it as a miracle, so he hasn't even eaten it. So let's see what happens. We have 3 more chapters, so we'll finish it. Chapter 10. Sergei's eyes opened suddenly. It was morning again, and something had awakened him. The faint streaks of dawn were already sending their pink fingers in through the metal bars of his cell window. In spite of the cold, he felt rested this morning, as though he had slept a full night at home in his own bed. He lay there for a few moments, remembering how warm he had felt when he went to sleep the night before. It had given him a wonderful feeling of peace, and he still felt that warmth now. And then he remembered the 2 slices of bread under his mattress. He hoped the warden would come to his cell soon and see the slices of bread. Then this whole thing would be over and he could eat the bread. Or maybe the warden would see that it was pointless to deprive Sergei of food any longer and let him eat his meals along with the rest of the prisoners. Sergei slid out of bed and onto his knees. The crisp morning air made the floor even colder, but he ignored the feeling. "Thank you, Lord, for every good thing in life," he prayed. And then, almost as if on cue, he heard a sound and glanced up at the window. Had the guard returned to put another slice of bread on the ledge again? A third time would be phenomenal. It was not yet light enough to see clearly, but Sergei thought he saw a faint shadow, and then he heard the scratching sound again. He tried to peer through the early morning darkness, but it was no use. He could see nothing. When he climbed up on his bed and reached up on the window ledge, there was yet another slice of bread. He brought it down and carefully cradled it in his hands. 3 slices of bread now. What a miracle! And again it looked like Lena's bread, soft and fresh, probably made just the night before. "I don't believe it, Lord!" Sergei breathed deeply of the bread as he held it close to his nose. "Well, actually, I do believe it. This is 3 times now." He glanced up at the window again. "It seems too good to be true, Lord. Am I dreaming?" He chuckled to himself again. "You have blessed me 3 times now." Sergei bowed his head in gratefulness, and a sense of relief flooded over him. He could finally eat a piece of bread now. He had 2 slices of bread under his mattress and another in his hands. 2 slices to prove to the warden that God had been watching over him. Sergei would show the warden that he served a real God who could provide real food for his children. He laid the new piece of bread on the chair and then took out the other 2 slices from beneath the mattress. 3 slices! It was a wonderfully glorious sight. But something within him wouldn't allow him to eat any of it. Something about the whole situation seemed unresolved. He stared at the 3 slices on the chair. Was the warden never going to come back? Sergei wasn't going to starve, at least not as long as the guard, or whoever it might be, was bringing him bread. Sergei thought about the warden long and hard. He was obviously a bitter, angry man. Sergei thought he knew what it was the warden wanted from this situation. But did he? Was it that the warden hated Christian pastors this much? Was the warden sadistic, taking delight in starving Sergei? Or was it something else? Did the warden have something to prove? When he had talked with Sergei 2 days before, he seemed pretty determined to prove that there wasn't a God. "There is no God," he had shouted. "This business of God has got to go." Sergei set his jaw and got a strange look in his eye. The warden wanted more than anything to prove to Sergei that there was no God, or maybe the warden was trying to prove it to himself. Sergei closed his eyes and thought about that. The man must have had some bad experiences. Well, Sergei wasn't going to help the warden keep that idea any longer than he had to. The warden wanted to prove that God was dead, or didn't exist at all, but Sergei was determined to prove that God was very much alive. He wanted the warden to know that God cared enough for a Moldovan pastor to see to it that he had bread every day in a lonely government prison cell. But now Sergei knew what he must do. The warden would come to see how Sergei was doing sooner or later, and if 1 or 2 slices of bread would seem like a miracle from God, then 3 slices would be even better. It was a tortuous decision, but he knew he had to do it. He lifted the mattress and laid the 3 slices side by side on the boards of his bed. Then he quickly laid the mattress down before he could change his mind. As Sergei sat down on the edge of the bed, he thought about the story in the Bible when Elijah was fed by ravens. It was an amazing story, and he wondered, is it possible that God is feeding me with ravens here in this prison cell? He hadn't heard any cawings or flapping of wings, but the shadow in the early morning light had been a dark one. The more that he thought about it, the more excited he became. And if the bread had been sent 3 times, how many more times would it come? The day dragged on, and that evening another slice of bread miraculously appeared on the window ledge. And the next morning another one arrived. In fact, for 3 days, morning and evening, the slices arrived, and every time Sergei would stash them away until there were 6 slices of black Russian bread lined up under his mattress. Sometimes he heard the bread being placed on the window ledge, and sometimes he didn't. But always it was there at dawn and dusk. By now, Sergei's resolve had been built up. He would wait for the warden to come, no matter what it took, and then the warden would see how much God had provided for him. He was terribly hungry, but he was tough, too. He had fasted before with church members when praying for special concerns in the church, and he had been in prison before, so he knew what real hunger felt like. It could be excruciating, but right now it felt pretty splendid knowing that God was working in a mighty way. Though Sergei was terribly hungry, each slice of bread that was added to the others under his mattress was a testimony to God's power. It was proof that God exists and that he could and would provide for those who were dependent on him. Each time Sergei thought of this, he drew strength from it and felt sure that in the end he would have the last word after all. If I live to tell about it, Sergei would joke to himself, the warden's trying to starve me to death, and meanwhile I'm refusing to eat the evidence that's been under my mattress all along. He smiled as he sat on the edge of his bed. But even if I die, the warden will still see the bread. He'll have to. When he cleans out my cell, he'll find the evidence right under my mattress. Sergei looked heavenward. Lord, you went 40 days without food, so I suppose I can wait a few days too. But please hurry, Lord. I don't want to spoil your plan. I don't want to get weak and give in to my hunger. Chapter 11. It was the morning of Sergei's 5th day in the Soviet prison in Bressani. The night had been a chilly one as usual, but Sergei had slept well again. He couldn't explain why he was resting so well. In spite of the cold temperatures in his prison cell, with only a shirt and a light coat on, he still felt warm. To Sergei, it was an unexplainable miracle. And then there were the slices of Russian black bread, which was a whole string of miracles. Sergei had now received 6 pieces of bread, from some benevolent provider, but miracle or not, he felt that he just couldn't eat any of them. They would provide such a wonderful chance to witness to the warden. As he lay on his bed, waking to the horizon's pink and ambers of another day, Sergei wondered, would there be another slice of black bread on the window ledge this morning? The routine had established itself for 3 days now. But did he really need any more bread? He had enough to serve as a testimony to God's power to provide. But if the warden didn't come soon, at some point in the near future, Sergei would probably need to begin eating pieces of the bread. In the cold spring air, the bread kept quite well, but it wouldn't last forever. No rats had come into Sergei's cell as of yet, but he couldn't be sure that they would stay away forever, especially at night when he was sleeping. Sergei listened for the scratching sound above him on the window ledge, but he heard nothing. He finally rolled out of bed, slipped to his knees, and began to pray as he did this time every morning. He thanked God for a good night's sleep, and for the bread he knew God would be sending. Then a thought struck him. Maybe the bread had already come. Maybe Sergei had overslept and already missed the provider this morning. But as he climbed up on his bed and reached the window's ledge, he found nothing. Would this be the day the bread would stop coming? 6 slices are enough to show the warden, aren't they? Suddenly he heard footsteps, and Sergei recognized the warden's voice. A flutter of thoughts raced through Sergei's mind as he realized that the warden had finally come. He jumped to his feet, his heart racing and his hands shaking. Now he could show the warden the 6 slices of bread. Now the warden would see that God does indeed provide for those who trust in him. Now he would believe in the power and the very evidence and existence of God. The warden stepped up to the little window in the cell door and peered through at Sergei. "Well, preacher, has your God supplied your every need?" he sneered, his beady black eyes squinting with enjoyment. "I can't complain," Sergei bowed his head humbly. "Can't complain," the warden taunted. "I bet you're hungry." "I'm hungry, it's true," Sergei said. The warden looked up and down disdainfully. "Well, I see you're none the worse for your days in solitary confinement. A bit thinner and maybe a little bit more pale, but I bet you're wiser too, huh?" "Much wiser, sir." "Then you have come to your senses and decided to end this foolishness we spoke of before? This nonsense about your God, whoever that is?" "Sir, actually I was just thinking that my God, this thanking my God this very morning for all he has given me, life and a healthy body, but has he given you what you need most? Food? Actually, sir, he has. Sergei had a twinkle in his eye. He has? The warden screwed up his face in surprise. Yes, sir, he has. It's just that, well, I just haven't eaten any of it yet. Haven't eaten any of it? What do you mean by that? The warden interrupted himself, a confused look on his face. My God has supplied all my needs, Sergei repeated. I just wanted you to see it. For the first time, Sergei saw a little of uncertainty cross the warden's face. He appeared as gruff as ever, but his look of scorn had turned to surprise now. You see, sir, he gave me bread. Sergei smiled at the warden sheepishly. The moment had come. It was time to show the warden the evidence. God had indeed provided for Sergei's every need. At least it seemed like it to Sergei. He had expected nothing more than the peace of God in his heart, and God had given him much more. He had given Sergei courage on the train to Bressani. He had given him warmth on the cold nights. He had given him bread every morning and night. But just as importantly, God had given Sergei the willingness to witness for Jesus. He had given him the willpower to not eat the bread. Sergei walked to his cot, lifted the mattress, and pointed to the 6 slices of bread. Look here, sir, my God has supplied all my needs through his riches in Christ Jesus. My God has promised that if I'm faithful to him, he will never fail me or forsake me, and this is living proof that he has kept his promise. An incredible peace flooded over Sergei's soul as he stared at the warden through the tiny window in the cell door. It was as if Sergei didn't care anymore what happened to him. No matter what the warden could throw at him, Sergei was sure that God would help him get through the ordeal. God was here in this prison cell, giving Sergei his every need, and much more. It took a moment, but the warden suddenly got his bearings. What in the world, he sputtered. I don't understand. Where did that bread come from? He threw the bolt lock aside, swung the door open, and came running into the cell to stare at the bread. Where did this bread come from? He shouted. Who's done this? Who brought you the bread? He grabbed Sergei by the shoulders and began to shake him. Sergei had to admit that it wasn't quite what he had been expecting. Somehow he thought that the warden would break down and apologize to Sergei and maybe confess that there was a God in heaven after all. Which of the guards did this? The warden demanded angrily. I'll have them horsewhipped. Sergei stared at the warden in surprise, but he knew that he had to say something. Actually, sir, I don't know who brought it. All I know is that every morning and evening I hear a scratching at the window, and when I climb up on my bed and check the window ledge, the bread is always there. But who is doing this? The warden roared. Sergei shrugged at the warden. All I can say is, I trusted the Lord, and he supplied my need. And now for the very, very last chapter. Chapter 12. For a moment, the warden said nothing. He just stared at Sergei, as though he believed him just a little. Maybe. But only for a moment. Who brought you the bread? He demanded once again. This is the last time I'm going to ask you. And then the inevitable happened. While the warden was fussing and fuming about who it was that might have been bringing Sergei the bread, there was a telltale scratching at the window ledge again. And then Sergei saw a shadow darken the opening in the wall above his bed. It was still barely light enough to see, but the dawn was getting brighter with every passing minute. As of yet, Sergei had never seen his benefactor. Whoever had brought him bread obviously didn't want to be discovered, didn't want to be caught bringing bread to a prisoner that the warden had sworn he would starve. Sergei stared up at the window. Was it indeed a guard who had been bringing him the bread? The guard would be able to climb the tree. That much was sure. Or was it someone or something else? Sergei squinted his eyes into the growing light. Was it a raven? Or might it be an angel? Angels didn't make shadows, did they? It didn't matter. Whether it was an angel or a raven, it was still a miracle. The two men stepped backwards to get a better look at who it might be. And then suddenly, to Sergei and the warden's surprise, there appeared on the window ledge a large black cat with a piece of bread in its mouth. Both men stood there dumbfounded, their mouths open in shocked surprise. Sergei was the first one to find his voice. Praise God, from whom all blessings flow. It was a cat. My God has supplied my every need by sending a cat. He stared up at the cat and then back at the warden. This was even better than he had imagined that it could be. But by the look in the warden's eyes, Sergei knew that something even more incredible had happened, and he was right. The warden rolled his eyes and kept repeating, "I do not believe my eyes. I see it, but I do not believe it. This is impossible." His eyes were earnest now, and in place of his scowl was a look of awe and wonder. "I have never seen such a miracle," he confessed. "Your God exists, after all, and today he will be my God too." Sergei could see that the struggle in the warden's heart was at its end. The man had come full circle and now seen the light. "Today you have shown me what I refused to see all these years." The warden bowed his head in humble shame. "Not only has your God sent you bread morning and evening these past few days, but he has sent it to you as a gift from me. You see, preacher, this is my..." He stumbled on his words and swallowed hard. "This is my daughter's cat, and that bread in its mouth is my wife's bread from my own kitchen table." The end. You see, God has 1,000 ways in which to provide for us, of which we know nothing. God is a God of miracles. He is bigger than we can think. He is bigger than we can even understand. He can do so much more than we can imagine, we can expect, we can ask or think. God is so good, and I hope that these stories have helped you to realize that. We're going to take a little break now from reading stories because our family is heading south for just a little while to help celebrate my dad's birthday. So we'll be back at some point in time. I will let you know when.